Welcome back. Joe with JC Model Creations here. We're continuing our build series, building the NX-01 USS Enterprise from Star Trek Enterprise, the TV series. This is Captain Archer's Enterprise, and in this episode, we continue building the nacelles and attaching them to the ship. And along the way, we're going to discuss the challenges of the tiny little parts found on these nacelles that makes this 1/1000 scale USS Enterprise NX-01 more satisfying at the end. So, are you ready? Let's go. All right, there you go. We've got a clean look. And the saucer section is coming along very nicely. Welcome back, my model making friends. Part 3, we're going to continue our build here, and we're almost done. Again, like I said earlier, this can be a very quick build. A lot of this is really the small little details, and then the painting. So let's continue. We ended part 1 and 2, and now we're going to move on to part number 3. So I'm going to set this aside and bring in the nacelles. All right, let's continue here. We're going to start with the top here, part 16, part 17. So here's 16 right here. And this is 17. So it's a little tricky, but we're going to start with piece number 24 here, which is a little plastic piece. There's 2 24s. There's 4.
All right, at this point, the sound went out on my mic, so I apologize, but we're working on pieces 24. There's 4 of them. They are flimsy, as I'm showing you here. So you got to be very, very careful as you're cutting these out. They're small little pieces that could potentially break. So I'm going to cut these as carefully as I can. There's one. And there's a second one that came right off once you cut the first one off. All right. Now, I do have to file. I use a little, filing needle that I purchased here and file some of the pieces down where I made the cut from the sprue, only because there are areas of the piece here that do need to sit flush into the plastic clear piece. That would be piece number 108 that's coming up, 108 and 109. So I'm filing these down to get them ready. And you want to do this as you're going through, making sure that everything's kind of neat and fits well. That way you avoid issues when you're fitting these in. All right. That feels okay. All right. So we've got to make sure that we're using piece number 108 here and 109. We've just identified those 2 there, and let's go ahead and you got to make sure that 108 and 109, the difference between the 2, 108 is kind of a smooth, 109 has some ridges on it, and part part 108, pardon me, 108 has the ridges, 109 is smooth, and part 108 is the clear piece with the ridges is what's going to face outside away from the ship. 109, the smooth piece, is the one that's going to be inside the ship. And each one of these has these little pieces on it that you don't need. So I'm going to cut those off because you don't need those little pieces. They're right at the very end of each one of these pieces, and they're part of the sprue. There's another piece right there. You can see that. I've got to cut that piece off. So your pieces should have nothing at the end there. I'm going to go ahead and shave this down, make sure it's smooth. Looks like there's some extra flash left after cutting off what wasn't supposed to be there. So let's smooth that out. Still more flash. I'm going to go ahead and smooth that out as well. But it should, there's so much on this side that I'm going to have to kind of cut it off. I'm going to use the X-Acto knife to cut that. Keep sanding a little bit here, filing, just to smooth it out. These areas are going to be on the inside of the nacelle, so it doesn't have to look exact or pretty. The reason you want to sand is to make sure the fit is correct, because you don't want the clear piece to be misaligned because there's some extra flash on it. Now, something else that you want to make sure to do is go ahead and sand down the holes on the sides of each of the clear pieces. Do it now, because once you're ready to install these into the nacelle, you don't want to have to stop and do this then. So if you kind of file out those little holes there at the ends of each of these plastic pieces for the nacelle, you'll be good to go. Okay, there's some more flash. Let me go ahead and take care of these. Again, you want to make sure that you're filing through those holes there so that there'll be no flash inside the hole, preventing you from snapping that in to the inside of the nacelle when the time comes. Alright, that's done. If you can notice here, there's some sprue in the middle of the pieces there. Piece number 17 and piece number 16 for that matter. So I'm cutting those pieces out carefully. I guess those are there for packing purposes. All right, doing the same thing on this side. Oh, and by the way, I'm lightly sanding it. You want to be very careful as you sand those where you cut down, because the way it's molded, it's very delicate. It's a very thin little piece right here on the nacelles. It's such a small ship that you don't want to press down hard as you're sanding. You want to just lightly, no pressure, just lightly sand it, and make sure that the area is smooth enough to where you're not seeing any little pieces of plastic sticking out from where you cut the packing pieces off. All right, that's all of those pieces. All right, now we've got to get these two little pieces here. That's the little dome for the front of the nacelle. I'm going to go ahead and cut that out. And then I'll go back and sand the area that I just cut to make sure it's smooth, so there's no problems installing it when the time comes. There's a little dome there. It's very small, as you can see. Let me sand that. With any model kit, sanding is a must. You're cutting plastic off the sprues, so it's going to leave a little spot that needs to be shaved down or smoothed out. So you're going to have to use these kind of files or sandpaper, whatever you want to use, but you do need to sand it down. All right, there's that nacelle buzzard collector, I guess you call it. Little dome there. Now let's, 4 pieces to cut off there. Let's get that taken care of and smooth that out. Yeah, you got to be very careful with these because they're very delicate and you push down and break it. So sand lightly, smooth it out lightly. All right, sanded this down. Look at the detail on this. You see that? There are little details that are molded in to the nacelles. I really enjoy kind of looking at each model kit just to see how the creators detailed the kit. So now we're going to get part number 24. Go ahead and put that into part number 108. And 108 has these notches that part 24 goes into. And this is a snap kit, so 24 are supposed to fit into 108 and kind of stay there. And 108 goes with 16. All right. And you also need to get these little number 26 and 25 pieces here. They're very, very small. Be very careful. Now, these little pieces are tricky. I'm able to get them right off with my hand there, but they're very, very small, very, very tricky. And I'm going to keep 26 on top, 25 on bottom. But they basically, you're supposed to clamp the nacelles around them and clamp them in. What I'm going to do here is something a little different. I think I'm going to use some glue to hold them in place on the nacelle and then put the nacelle together. It's going to be a little tricky. Okay, let's get the clear piece. Let's get this ready to go. Now, again, these fit together. There are little notches there that you put in the part onto the clear piece there. You put a number 24 into 108, and they should fit together. But again, I don't see how this kit can be done without some glue there because this feels like it'll just fall right out. So I'm going to put some glue into the little notches there and make sure that the solid plastic piece, part number 24, stays onto the clear plastic piece, part number 108. So here we go. Let's get some glue into the notches. All right. Okay, let's get this piece right in there. All right, there you go. It's in. Okay, let's let that dry. Put that aside. And let's do the same thing on the other side. Test fit it. Yep, that works. Goes in perfectly. All right. Okay, let's get some glue in the little areas there. where part 24 is going to fit in. Put them together. You know, the nacelles have lots of little pieces in there that we have to put together before we put them into the nacelle. But there you go. Now, some of you guys may want to paint these clear pieces before you do this. Paint them blue or whatever. I'm not, only because they're so small once it's in the nacelle. I'm okay with this showing like that. And you know, I'm gonna paint over everything in with the primer. The primer's gonna hit it, so it'll be the color of primer. Okay, now you've got some other pieces here that need to be cut off from this plastic piece there that's going to go in part 109. Again, let's take care of that. Those are not necessary, these pieces. And you can compare it to the picture here. They're just not necessary. So I'm cutting them off. Packing material, I guess. There's another piece here. These two holes, and again, you've got pieces at the end that need to come off and make it all smooth. You know, when you do this, you want the short part to go toward the front, the long piece to go toward the back, and you know, as you can see here, you've got the short part and the long piece there, and that's the way you position it on the nacelle. And you know, you've got the short little area of part 24 that goes towards the front, and the long piece goes towards the back. Okay, putting these in, gluing them in. There you go. That's looking good. And pushing that into the nacelle there. And this is where you're drilling the, shaving the little holes there comes in handy. Went right in there. Let's do the other side. Okay, here we go again. You want to make sure that you've got your sides correct. And it clicks right into those two notches there. I'm use my tool here to push in one notch, one side. Being very, very careful. You don't want part 24 to pop out. All right, let's go ahead and start getting everything ready to glue. I'm going to put some glue onto the clear pieces so they stick to the nacelle. But even though you're gluing these and they're, you know, kind of clicked in, you got to be careful when you're putting the nacelles together, because you could easily kind of put pressure from the outside onto these pieces here, and they'll just collapse into the inside of the nacelle. So as we're putting the nacelle pieces halves together, we've got to be careful about that. The other challenge, of course, are these tiny little part 26 and 25 that go into the nacelles there. They can be a big challenge, because the way the instructions tell you to do it is just to snap the nacelles together and position 25 and 26 to fit in, no problem. But what we need to do here is we need to make sure that there's not going to be any obstruction, and that's what I'm doing. I'm going to go ahead and shave off any extra flange. I'm going to use my files just to make sure that the holes where 25 and 26 go are, you know, there's no flash on them. To make sure those holes are clear, basically, and that there's no flash on them when we get part 25 and 26 to go in. So let's do that. I'm just going to go ahead and clear out right now those little nudges there on each side. When you close it, of course, it represents a little hole where 25 and 26 go together. So let's clean those out. All right, I'm going to be very careful here. There's that little piece. Yep, see that? It's really small. And you want to make sure you put it in the right way. It goes in a certain way. As you can see here, the shape of the area there on the nacelle fits the shape of that little piece a certain way. So make sure you put it in the right direction. Look at that. All right, I'm putting it in, getting that set up there, making sure it's smooth. Yeah, let's get this next one installed. Okay, these little pieces are really tricky. I think this probably might be one of the toughest parts of this build is these little pieces that go at the end of the nacelles and the way they're designed to be put together. Look at that. So you can see where the shape of that one at the bottom goes in a certain way as well. Okay, now they're in there, and I'm going to go ahead and use some glue, kind of glue that in, but obviously the glue doesn't set for a while. It takes a while to set. So the idea here is that there's glue there already when you put the nacelle halves together, and there's also glue on the nacelles when you're putting them together as well. So that way the nacelles stay stuck together here. Okay, let's see here. It's a little tricky again. They're in, and they're kind of just sitting there. Gotta be very careful on that one. I think I'm going to put the nacelles together. Let's put both halves down. Go ahead and put some glue down on this nacelle that's at the bottom, and make sure there's glue in all the areas that need glue. Now let's go ahead and snap these together. So you've got glue on the little pieces at the end of the nacelle, and now you've got glue all over one half of the nacelle. Let's snap them together here. Looking at the notches and aligning them, and being very careful not to push in the little clear pieces that we worked on. Be very careful on that. So what makes it kind of tough here is you can't push right in the middle here, because those pieces there will collapse into the nacelle. So you can only really snap it from the sides here, from the beginning and the end. And there you go, it's snapped together. It's a good fit there. I'll putty up some of the gaps if there are any, but for now, this is looking good. I see that. Okay. Be very, very careful here if you're using your fingers to push the gaps in on the top and the bottom of the nacelle. Try not to put your fingers onto the areas where the clear plastic is. Now, with this little dome, you can simply just kind of push it in. You don't need to, do anything special. It just kind of snaps into the front. So let's put some glue down here, and then we'll snap that dome into the front of the nacelle. And here we go. All right, and there you have it. One nacelle done, one more to go. All right, let's go ahead and take care of the next one.
All right, we're going to continue here, and As you can see, I'm going to start working on the little gaps that you can find just in these little areas here on the pylons, or should I say the connectors between the pylons and the saucer section. So, the glue, it did somewhat of a good job, but there's still some gaps. So let's go ahead and fill these gaps in with this putty. I like this tube of putty because it has kind of a needle nose output, which makes it very, very fitting and fills the gaps pretty well. So I'm going to put some of this in, and just don't worry about, as you're putting this putty into the crevices, into the gaps, don't worry about overspill or putting more putty than needed. The idea here is to fill in everywhere that you see a gap. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the putty into the gap, as I'm doing here, and then I'm going to use a paper towel to push, for lack of a better word, to push the putty into the gap. And then after I do that, I'll wipe the areas around the gap so that, to get rid of as much excess putty as I can. And then the last step is I kind of lightly brush the putty that's in the gap down with the tissue, or should I say with the paper towel. So you're going to see that demonstrated here. Okay, so there you have it. I finished doing this, and as you can see, I pushed the putty into the gap there, and then I wiped around the gap first, and then as I finished it up, I wiped the putty itself right in front of the gap. So I wiped off the putty from the sides, and then I smoothed out the putty that was in the gap there. So that's just a technique that I used for this particular build, and I'm hoping that it'll help you out on your builds. Okay, it's looking good. Let's move on to the next step. Okay, so now that we've finished the putty on the saucer section and we're letting that dry, we're going to go ahead and work on the second nacelle. And this is just basically a rinse and repeat. We're going to do the exact same thing we did on the first nacelle onto this second nacelle. So let's get that done, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, so we finished the second nacelle. And let me just show you. As you can see, I'm using masking tape to kind of hold them together so that the glue can dry. And I'm doing this on the ends where I feel like it should be done. I'm not worried about when I take this off, because if some of that cement glue stays on the nacelles, it'll be okay. We'll just sand it off. Next step, we're going to start connecting the nacelles to the pylons. Here we go.
Okay, we're back, and we've given the nacelles plenty of time to dry, so I'm going to go ahead and take these off. There you go. Remember, we're not very concerned about the tip. I know it looks ugly right now. I guess if I were going to light it up, I would have been more careful about this, but I'm not too concerned about the way this looks, only because it's going to be painted over. I might lightly sand it before we're all said and done. This tip is a little clearer, but still, again, we're going to paint over it. So at this point, not too concerned about that. Take this off. All right, not too bad. So if you look here, you see this little detail that we had to kind of fit in and make sure it was in the right way. We also have it on the underside here. There's a little detail there. These fit perfectly. Overall, I'm glad the way the nacelles came out. I think they're going to be great. And as dull as the plastic looks right now, I think it's going to be really nice once it's all painted in. Now, there is a small gap here on the spine of this particular nacelle. I'll fill that in with putty right now. Let me see. This one also has a little small gap here. I'll fill in with putty, but it shouldn't take too long. Let's go ahead and take care of that. There you go. Filled in. Oh, missed a little spot right here. All right, there you go. And it looks kind of ugly right now, big white stripe there, but that'll be gone with the paint and all that. Let's see this one here. Yeah, let's take care of this little gap. Of course, this little gap could have been prevented with a tighter fit. Maybe if I had made sure to kind of tighten the tape up or use some clamps. That's some little mini clamps to kind of put the fit together. If you have those, you can clamp these together, but you got to be really careful with this little piece here when you're doing that. And that's what kind of prevented me from really clamping down on that. But, not a problem. Let's just take care of this here now. And again, the technique I'm using, like I said before, I'm pressing down first to make sure that the putty gets inside the gap there. So I'm pressing down. And once I'm happy that the putty's in the gap, I'm just wiping around it, not directly on the gap. So I'm just wiping around it here. Wiping this one off. And then I'm using the bamboo stick here to take any extra putty out of the little, where it shouldn't be, basically. Right, so these little grooves here for the panels, trying to take putty out of that carefully, just to make sure we still have that panel lining. Okay, here's a little gap right here and here that I've got to fix up. So let me do that. There and there. Push down into the gap and wipe on the outside. There we go. All right. All right. We don't need to let the putty dry before we put the nacelles on the ship. So let's do that next. Let's get that done. And then we should be wrapping it up for this one. We want to make sure that part 108, which has the grooves on it, is what's on the outside. So I'm just kind of looking here. And this is the side that's on the outside. So that one goes there. And sure enough, these have the grooves here. The clear part is the one with the grooves, and that goes on the outside of the saucer. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, what I'm going to do, again, I recommend this on this little ship here is you definitely want to use cement glue on your nacelles, because they are a little flimsy when they go on, and they do come off easily. Let's do this one first. Okay, go. Definitely want to get enough of this cement glue on it that it'll stay stuck on your ship here. All right. All right, let's go on this one, this side, over here. By the way, when you're putting these on, just a little tip, right here, you want to make sure that this area here, that they kind of go in here and then push it this way. So you're putting in the nacelle right on this side. You're putting almost like a little lid being pushed down, and these are the little notches that hold the lid, and then you push them down. So be very aware of this area here as you're putting these nacelles on, okay? Yeah, let's see. They look pretty good to me, to my eye. Hopefully to yours too. It's kind of a tricky view on camera here, but the hope is that they look okay in your eye. I'm going to try to reposition this one before it dries up. Let me do that real quick. This kit, the mold, is not a perfect mold, okay? It is just not a perfect mold, unfortunately. And that's okay. I mean, painted and displaying it from afar and from up close too. If you do the right paint job, you get the decals on, you're going to have a really nice looking display piece for your desk, your office desk, whatever, wherever you want to display this thing. What I like about these small 1/1000 scale ships, they're small enough to display at the office. If you go to work, you can take this with you and display it and make it a talking piece. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I think it looks good. All right. Okay, my friends. The nacelles are on. The ship is looking good. What we're going to do next is we're going to paint this thing and get the decals on. And we'll do that in the next episode. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and share. It does help my channel quite a bit. I'm almost at that 1,000 mark for followers, and I'd really like to hit it. So if you don't mind subscribing, if you haven't subscribed yet, for those of you who are subscribed, thank you so much. And we will see you next time as we finish up this ship. Thanks again, and have a great week, everybody.